Chair is calling the meeting to order. We are recording.
Okay, this is the Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 meeting of the Camden Capital Planning Committee. Camden Townhouse Auditorium, 6 p.m. First order of business, and present are Donna Hatch, President, Ed Covet, Resident, Dick Hello, Town Treasurer, John Flynn, Town Selectman, Doug Boyd, Co-Chair of Advisory, and Maura Ryan, Residents. And myself.
Anybody online?
Yeah, I know.
It's looks like
Bob
there's only one
Markle, Town
participant, which is Bob.
Administrator, chairing.
Top liver.
Lisa Sternberg.
No one's online.
Okay. Got the last part? Okay. So then, we'll begin. Thad did up the May 4th, 2021 minutes, and I included in the packet, there were just some slight revisions on the April 20th. So if you're hanging on to the minutes, those are the ones we approved last meeting. So May 4th. Any motion? Accepting minutes?
I make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from the May 4th, 2021 meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And then next, before we get into the townhouse matter, I believe that this is the sheet, Bob, that you had sent to us. That was an agenda item that it says Bob will get a hold of Bob on vehicles, waiting for information from Bob on vehicles. And I know that we have that really comprehensive sheet, but I'm thinking we had a topic of discussion about the mileage for the police vehicles. And we were wanting to discuss where there's been a turnaround at 100,000 miles and whether or not that is appropriate and should stay in place, or with vehicles as they are now, consideration of whether that could be extended out. Does anybody have any thoughts?
So are you questioning the agenda item or are you adding to the existing? I just want to make sure I understand what you're, because you're
Okay,
asking a
I
question
know
based on
that
the
Bob-
agenda we just approved, so.
Yes, what I added on today's agenda is that we were going to okay, distribution of information on vehicles provided by Mr. Markle, a follow-up,
That was the sheet that you sent.
That's what I sent. I sent to Thad.
Yeah.
right? Having to
And
do
then
with-
during the week, and I copied Elon, sent a note to Mark and Jeff and asked them if they had any more detail as far as can we see what that mileage per year is? And if they had records that showed what the expense per vehicle, the expense sheet that you sent us on the cruisers was all the cruisers. It wasn't broken up by any given one.
Right.
And there was no information from department or police department.
Well, I wonder that you said you sent it to Jeff. The email. was
Not
changed
Jeff,
or-
not Jeff.
S. Conway. That's so.
I'll double check. I can't get on here. To check that. but-
Not the passive.
That original sheet was
Says
prepared,
I'm logged in.
it was prepared nearly a year ago,
Yeah,
and it had mileage. I think what we do is update the mileage
and
now.
And that's kind of what
See
the
how much-
sheet, the one sheet that I sent had every vehicle listed, all 37.
Yep.
It had what you had listed for mileage
Right,
a year ago.
yes,
The fire department, I think, had this, or Mark had this year.
Yeah.
But I think Lisa's question is more like a philosophical type thing. Should we be changing them over at 100? I think that was where you were going, right?
Well, I think that we did talk about that last time, and,
Don't I remember in the conversation us, we were going to ask Kathy if they had repair bills by car number,
Yeah, and then I sent an email out asking basically,
and you got no response? or-
not yet. I only sent it out.
they don't track by vehicle. I did ask Chief Farnsworth to start tracking by vehicle. He told me that they would start doing that.
Okay,
I don't know how much they have.
Okay.
I have a thought on 100,000 miles. In the 6 or 7 communities where I've been, standard's about 120,000, depending upon repairs.
Yeah.
And also, now that we're buying these new Chevys, Farnsworth told me that the experience in other police departments is that these new Chevys go as much as a year longer. So we may have to, if that in fact is the case, we may have to adjust the schedule for purchasing new
yeah,
cars.
right now, what he's got there, he's got 1 at 80, 1 at 70, 1 at 65.
It was all based on the extended warranty. That was the old powertrain. Right? That was-
Right.
They were gonna, once you get the extended thing, well, from turn it over.
We're dealing with an anecdotal argument that if I keep the cars too long, it will cost me more.
Yeah,
I think what that's suggesting is that we get data and we start to track that.
Exactly.
And even if we get them to keep a couple longer and do a test case on it, and see what the data shows us.
So we have somebody to do the data. Now that, I hate to say, it, you got a clerk that's sitting there guarding the thing during the day. Well, just that person has time to
Yeah, I
make
mean,
a
I can,
spreadsheet for it.
I can set up a spreadsheet, no problem. I just wanted to see what they had currently.
I just can't, I don't know, when you say they don't track by vehicle, that just seems.
How can they not?
Right.
If they're
Well, it's
going
easy.
to countryside
Well,
auto,
if-
like a repair slip has
Well,
to
they get the
have
slip,
a
but they just don't.
description.
Well,
It's
the
got
slip-
mileage
The slip
information.
doesn't say, I see the invoices, the slip doesn't necessarily say what car it's on.
That's the issue.
Especially
Yeah.
a handwritten one from.
Yeah.
But it should, well, minimally, it should say like 2019 Chevy
You
Tahoe.
would think, wouldn't you?
And there might be demo full.
I have familiarity with that.
But,
I doubt that.
but let's see if, you know, if they are available, and let's start gathering data going forward.
I mean, there are vehicle numbers assigned for every vehicle, right?
Oh,
And that they
yes.
labeled
Right.
as such too.
Car one,
there you go.
well,
You know, just talking about longevity, I happened to be at the Honda dealer getting oil change 3 days ago. And the service manager says he takes care of the SUVs that Bay State uses to run drugs from there down in Boston. Those 3 vehicles are pushing 500,000 miles.
yeah.
Oh,
Now,
yeah, they're meant to go.
now cruisers are used a lot differently. They spend a lot of
Sit around.
time.
Yeah, working from the donut shop.
And never shut the engine off. They don't shut the engine off either.
Always go up to the cheap shop.
Yeah.
Fly car, the fly car park.
Yeah,
Everybody parks there, Mark, whatever, support local business.
So that's the discussion.
okay, so we need more data.
and so how do we go about getting that?
Well,
I think what I can do is send a letter
Yeah.
to the new police chief, the
We
fire
saved it a
chief,
couple of days ago. We'll see what the response is.
and,
But
Um,
does it make sense to give them a document and say, this is what we're looking for, so that they're just putting that in there?
I do.
Perfect.
Rather than leaving them guessing.
Yeah, because you're gonna ask them to try to put it together
More, didn't you mention that each officer logs in
and they do.
mileage?
They
beginning of
verbally
the
call,
shift?
yep, they verbally call, at the end of the shift, they call in and they give, or when they get gas. And at the end of their shift, they give their mileage to
So
dispatch.
this is reported somewhere already. This is-
That's what I'm, that's
Yes.
what I said in there. chances are I wasn't looking for additional information.
So it shouldn't really be like they're reinventing the wheel. It's gotta be somewhere.
We can easily get the mileage.
Sure.
Getting the repair data broken down by vehicles is something that can be done also, but hasn't been done.
Well, but maybe now with the new chief, now's the time to say, hey, this
Yeah.
is what we're looking to start to do, and I think he would be very receptive to
Well, they may already
understanding what
have
we're
some,
trying to do.
they may already have some of that, because I did ask all three departments to start doing that a year ago.
It's the type of information which over a couple of years, you should be able to build a decent database that you can then work from.
So then that's something else that the clerk at the police station could be assigned to, is to try to grab those receipts and start laying it out.
Oh, they've got an admin person now who handles it, so I'm hoping she already has it. We'll see.
Okay.
Let's wait for an answer.
Okay, that's kind of the point that I am at.
Because the only thing you may run into is with the chip issue that they're having with trucks and other vehicles right now. If we're trying to get a vehicle in the next 6 months to a year, we may potentially get pushed off because a lot of places don't have the ability to fill orders.
But if in fact the Chevrolets that they're now buying, and going to be buying, last a year longer, the town may not have to acquire the extra vehicle
Sure.
according to the pattern of the past.
Can I ask why the 2018 Ford SUV was given to the fire department with very low mileage? If mileage seems to be like one of the key indicators.
That was to take place, that was the fly car.
Yeah, the fly car is getting turned in for the pickup truck
That's the fly car. That one that you're reading is the fly car.
this year.
That is the fly car.
I think that's a
They put-
2014 though.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that 2018 seems suspicious.
That's not, that fly cart there isn't that new.
That was a
Yeah, and if
2014.
mileage is
Maybe
kind of
that's-
like the driver of car turnover, why would they be?
And they've had that longer than a year.
Well, we're not giving one to the fire department now because we're buying the fire department on the bid.
But they were trading the Dodge pickup and the SUV fly car
So this
for
was-
the pickup truck.
I'd be really surprised if that's on this list.
That, because that happened, that transaction happened a few years ago when they gave that to the
This
fire
one is a
department.
year old.
Yeah, but it was a few years ago because they got it lettered and everything. They've had that fly car for a couple of years now.
At least 2 years.
Yeah,
I think it happened in 2018. It's not a 2018 car.
That might be it.
Yeah,
That's right.
that makes more sense.
That
And
might
so
have
is
any
that,
sense.
is that car one that we're talking about, but it should say 2013 or?
I don't believe that the fire department car is on the
It
police
should be on the
inventory.
No, he has a star next to it, though.
For different years.
he has it notated there.
Yeah, there's no asterisk on this letter to the client.
Anyway.
And these cars that they're buying now are going to have to get all new electronic equipment, lights and so forth, because they can't transfer them from the Fords to the new
So
vehicles.
I wouldn't think it's
So,
much forward.
Find out for us.
at least for a few years, it's going to have to be 54, 55,000.
So these vehicles on this letter from 2020 August, these are the current vehicles?
No.
They are not.
They might have bought one since this.
Okay.
That was a different, the other spreadsheet, Lisa, which I can't get to, had the current mileage.
Didn't Jeff just get a brand new 2020?
So are you saying just the mileage is wrong or the car?
But this is like-
It was probably right mileage for 2020.
Yukon or something. Because I think, don't they have a Yukon now? Yeah,
I think they do.
is that's what the chief's truck or vehicle was it a fully loaded Yukon?
I don't know. Well, I honestly think we're wasting time talking about something we don't have any information on.
I agree.
Alrighty, moving on then to the townhouse situation. Somebody who wants one, there are copies. You're Donna, and
Anybody need a copy? I'll come up.
I'll take our-
And, well, as I recall, I mean, I have something that I'm interested in, which is what are the projects that have been completed since this report came out in May of 2017 that are either in this document and check it off, or are not in this document, but we're done.
You can eliminate the $135,000 for remodeling the police space, because that's all been done. Turned into offices, and it's a different configuration than was anticipated. But four offices, 3 private offices, a group office, shared office space, and an ADA bathroom. And it came in under that. I can't remember what we spent. It was like 75 to 80,000, something like that.
I think it was, yeah, maybe.
Wasn't done in 2 troughs.
Yeah.
That was at page 24.
So anything in that recommendation for that space is no longer relevant.
Okay.
Yeah, 139,000.
Does anybody have something they want to share about the documents and
I don't know where you got where was you have it up. Is this yours?
Yeah.
Okay, where did the electrical number come from? I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
It's on page 31. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's just for the elevator. Okay.
I mean, you look at elevator, that's your biggest cost. Now you're into like what Hobie said. What is it, that 30%? You start pulling enough spread out of the sweater, you hit 30%, you have to trigger it.
Yeah,
And that's cumulative over 3 years.
that's what I'm told. I'm not an expert, it's all anecdotal. When we were discussing the firehouse, I had a discussion with the building inspector and asked, who is the person who determines that compliance? And he said it was him. So he's the one who we keep an eye on. So we have a resource available to us to, if we're trying to avoid that, to be able to do that. I'm kind of curious. And the one thing that was missing in here in my mind is I've heard anecdotal stories of the electrical system building needing work, the mechanical, the water and heat system needing work. And I've even heard there might be some foundation repairs. And that's what they're talking about. But you know, it's anecdotal and it's not from experts. And that's the one thing that this doesn't seem to address at all. It talks about some of the exterior facade repairs, but it doesn't seem to address any of that work. So I think that's information we would need going forward.
Maybe they didn't see the snakes where they came in.
And my question would be, is a repair to an electrical system, let's say we have to upgrade a panel and spend 50 grand, is that part of the money, remodeling money that would trigger ADA? Or is that a repair to an existing system, so it would be excluded?
Well, they do have a repair downstairs because it says under masonry repair and restoration, they do have concrete repairs at foundation and an allowance of $10,000.
Okay,
So I mean, I think they must be, that must address what issues they think for any openings.
One of the issues with that 30% rule is it's 30% of assessed value. That's easy when you're dealing with a private building.
this is a $5 million building.
Wow. This building, you know, do they do assessments on any of the public buildings for any reason at all?
Yeah.
Do we have an assessed value? Our
Yeah.
insurance-
Yeah.
How about an insurance value is,
But
there's
that's
a lot of room for movement on that issue. of
and that's a
assessed
4-year-old
value.
number. Yep.
You know, are you talking fair market value?
Oh, we have to get.
Exactly. I mean, there's a big range that you can work on here. So I mean, you can push your 30% number up if you know,
Right.
you fiddle with the assessed value issue.
Right. Because, there's some of these things that I would love to not bother triggering. A sprinkler system in this building is something I'd love not to have to put in. I don't think that's cost effective for us. $28,000 for the stair treads that are the wrong shape just kills me. I can't figure that out. And there's some things in the report that are a little odd. I mean, they go into great detail about grading in the back would allow us to get rid of the step on the back door, but they don't talk about the fact that once you open the door, you're on a stairway landing.
That's right, yeah. And you can't open the door independently.
No, but I get, it says all public entrances must be accessible, but I guess that's not a public entrance, it's an employee entrance.
I mean, technically, we get away with the Melville room because we have the, so to speak, exit coming up the stairway. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have an office down there because you don't have a second exit. And we had that discussion like years
Do
ago.
both exits have to be accessible?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Fire.
Yeah, that was the thing. That's why we had to repair that one that comes up by the kitchen, or else we would have been shut down.
Yeah, you have to have 2 ways out.
It's like 50 feet to, and they have to be accessible.
Mhm.
Oh,
The information about the triggering of the,
Well, we do have an ADA commission now. We should read them in on this if we want their opinion.
it's right here on pages,
No, I'm just saying now,
Yeah.
but I know I'm concerned, you might be concerned, hey, look, this report's 4 years old.
mhm.
Is it worth going out and saying, hey, can we have rep once?
Well, and all the
Addition
building
1B.
materials and everything costs are all gonna be a lot more than what they originally were.
Well, that's the danger, that you go back, if you're asking for construction estimates right now, boy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the purpose of this meeting is what information don't we have? So if we wanted to bring in someone to look at plugging some specific holes in the information we have, we'd at least be able to write an RFP based on this conversation.
And there is an ADA committee,
There is.
yeah.
And also the building inspector has a lot to say.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that to play out a scenario that has some prospect of happening, we are meeting fairly regularly now on the court case. Let's just assume that something happens and we settle it. I would think the next decision for the Board of Selectmen would be whether to stay here, in which case it'd be good to have a cost to upgrade this building to code and make other improvements so that, that this is useful, or to relocate to. Third Britain.
When we had Aaron and Ed from the school department in, I asked the question about what their future plans for that building were. And we were strongly led to believe that they can't give up the space no matter what happens now.
This would be a thing, keep in mind, we do have a valid lease. They have a lease with that building.
They would have to abandon the building.
Right.
And I think that at this point, unless they rehab Memorial School, which has gone too far over the hill probably to bring back, that they don't have a space to run their programs. They're utilizing so much of that building now.
Right, but then you're into, I think, to dovetail on your point, how much of the square footage do they actually need? It's like having closets. Okay, I got 5 closets, I'll fill all the closets, but I think if I was 3 closets, and how much room does the town hall function need in that building? Well,
But you also run into safety and
And I know I'm
security.
doing a tough spot here, obviously.
No, it's okay, but I mean, then you have to think about the safety and the security, because they have to lock down the buildings. You have to make sure that we would have to still manipulate the building to some degree, that there'd be no access from anything, just say you cut it at one point, there'd be no access for anybody to get over here to get into the school, and then the kids, depending on who's in that building, if they put kids in there, you can't be there during the time for anywhere outside for recess.
Cohabitation is a wonderful concept, but I'm not sure what the school committee's incentive would be to release part of the building.
I know that, I'm just saying, thinking outside there.
Now,
Okay, is it,
you,
are they using 100% or?
you might make a case for, we don't have enough space here, can we move the library over there?
Sure.
That would probably be an easier case to sell.
That's still a thing, okay, maybe, why don't we swap them? Maybe they can put the school over here.
It worked when I was in seventh grade.
There you go.
To make it accessible. Um,
Because then you'd have the ADA issues because of the students that are over there currently.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
I know.
You can use the fire station instead of one floor.
I think there are quite strict rules about cohabitation with a public school. And that includes not just the building, but the grounds. And,
Well, wasn't it Essex,
$75.
wasn't it Essex that put a public library in one of their school buildings? Was that Essex that did that? There's somebody up on the North Shore.
Well, this discussion at this point.
I know that there are libraries in some of the high schools. In fact, that they have battles about whether or not there ought to be librarians there, or whether they ought to have school department librarians
Oh,
there.
Lord. Got a union battle. So, I think at this point, I don't think there's a high enough, in my mind, a high enough confidence that a lot of space would become available to there that would make me not want to investigate what it takes to make this building work.
Sure. I mean, to Thad's earlier point, when we first started these discussions, we have a lot of open space. So with the open space we have, is there room for an addition someplace else, adding another building someplace else? I mean,
This land, yeah.
Yeah.
What would the ramifications be of moving Green Meadows to TWB?
Have you heard Station Rebellion? That's fully utilized at TWB on a regular basis right now.
that building is completely ADA compliant and appropriate for the children who are pre-kindergarten up to mid-elementary, or actually fully elementary. So
I mean, if you were gonna discuss something, you almost want to talk putting a wing on Green Meadows if you wanted to extend it further.
Yeah.
And I think that's doable. You know, I think you'd have an issue with the kids, with the cafeteria maybe, it'd need a little more room. But if you wanted to, you could easily put another wing out the back.
Well, I don't know about easily, but.
I'm saying that's an option.
it could be done,
Yeah.
and it is,
I'd be willing to sell you my backyard.
well, I was thinking about that. That's the right direction.
A dollar.
Well, that's,
Oh, forget it.
No, actually,
Inflation you're talking.
No, that's
Okay,
not
back
true.
on
He's
track.
leasing it for $1, he and Charlie, they took it by eminent domain. Just him. No,
that is an option though, to add on to the building, if we remain, that configuration of pre-K
Well,
to 8.
as I was contemplating the library and the type of space that they use, it's also, I was thinking, wild idea, you could even attach that to the senior center.
Mhm.
Particularly like the library, when they're in normal business, uses this room for gatherings.
Mhm.
One of the things that Becky said is they only have one great room if they had a second great room. Well, maybe you could make them so that they use this 1 or 2 days a week, then the COA could use it 3 days a week. Who knows?
Or make that senior center expansion bigger.
Right, and,
Another couple thousand square. feet.
Right,
I
so-
don't know much libraries.
And at least if you,
12,000 square foot.
but at
Oh,
least
no,
if you
probably
had the
true.
library at the senior center, people would have access to it, walking to it.
Oh, yeah, both sides of the hall, all the
It
way
is,
back.
okay. I guess I've only ever been on one side.
Yeah,
Maura just made a really important point.
Oh,
about-
and we weren't listening, I'm
I know,
sorry.
Yeah.
get used to it, it's okay.
Repeat.
So the thing about considering it being at the library, having the library at the senior center, I forget what it was now.
It's ADA compliant.
Oh, well, it's easier for people to access it, but so where we've been talking about sidewalks and accessibility for the folks over in Centennial Commons, they could walk to the senior center and they'd have more access to the library
Yeah,
versus them having to try to come all the way down Main Street where are not sidewalks and it's not as easily accessible for some.
Yeah, I mean, their best customers are seniors and young kids.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I'm all for at least exploring as we were looking at the senior center expansion, if there were a way to include the
Biggest
library.
obstacle- Biggest
or
obstacle to expand the
space.
senior center is the house to the north. If you have that lot, because there's a huge lot behind it, and you shifted the property, picked up that extra 200 feet, the parking lot would go that way, you could easily put the library over there.
I mean,
That's-
the
that's-
reason this popped into my mind is, I was expecting the argument is how long will this building be big enough to house the town hall?
Mhm.
And the cure for that is, well, I can take that component and put it somewhere else.
Sure.
Fairly simple, and that frees up 3,000-4,000 square feet.
It does, but then you still have the access question, which is the final.
Well, down by the elevator, John, just vote for the elevator.
I don't see, I'm not sure what the stalling point about the elevator is, because I think we do have a responsibility to the people of the town to sustain this building and maintain it. It is our town property and
And I can't believe I'm saying this, it's only $250,000.
I mean, the great scheme of how expensive it could be, but.
It's less than we spent cutting
So,
down dead trees.
Now, if it were to be considered a historic building, I know sometimes there are additional funds that are available for certain projects.
And additional restrictions usually.
Yep.
I wouldn't count on that.
No, I mean, but I think of all the different aspects of things that they've
Well,
kept the facade of some buildings and they've, you keep the front of the building and then you can adjust the backside of the building. and you
That
can
ends up being,
reconfigure it.
that ends up being so much more expensive than just tearing down a building.
it seems like you should be able to, there should be grant money for ADA accessibility, but.
There is. We asked for planning money. You always have to have your plan, then you get your grants. Asked for it last year. They said no, because you don't have a fully functioning ADA committee.
Right, now you.
Now we do. We're waiting for the new round
Okay.
of grants. I don't know how long it'll take, but it shouldn't take very long to come up with an ADA plan for the town, given that our buildings are reasonably in
Are
good
they
shape.
meeting that? Or
Pardon?
are they meeting at all?
No, although Becky sent me an email saying, do you want to get the group together again soon? So I think we will. A plan, and then you can get serious grant money to make ADA oriented improvements, including up to $250,000, which would probably be the cost of putting an elevator here.
Or offset a good chunk of it.
So,
What about federal money for infrastructure?
That's Bob's department.
I don't know that the new legislation, ARPA, what we're calling it, provides federal money for that purpose. I listened to one long program last week, and that was not mentioned. There's
So-
money for replacing lost revenue. There's money for infrastructure. But I didn't hear that you could use funds for accessibility.
so we need a little more data on mechanical systems, if there's money that has to be spent here. And we need somebody who really understands the 30% rules and how to deal with that and what's excluded. I mean, I remember anecdotally hearing that money spent to make it ADA compliant doesn't count toward the 30%. Which
Yeah, I think like windows and doors don't count.
yeah, there's some exterior stuff that we could be done. And again, I want to know whether repairs to a system versus upgrades and remodeling. So we kind of need somebody who really knows that stuff.
So would there be anybody on the ADA compliance committee that would potentially know, or is that something that maybe we should have them involved in? Even if we had to decide on if we were gonna take this project and phase it to be able to do certain work, then at least you're attacking the ADA compliance, certain ADA compliance things first. You know what I mean?
An architect would be the one for that. Yeah.
I would
Time
think
bomb.
one of the things you would want to do is get someone to look at the building first. And
Is that what they
then
did?
say, do this, and then at that point, you determine what is ADA required, what is ADA required.
yeah. and
I would think if we got the
architect-
planning money this summer, hire someone to do an ADA plan for the town who is qualified to answer those kinds of questions as well.
Well, do we need an ADA plan, or is the big issue here, the building, the structure of the building? Like you said, electrical systems, have somebody come in and inspect the electrical system, inspect the plumbing system, inspect the basement, inspect the heating system. And based on that, he's gonna say that heater's good for another 10 years.
I think part of the problem was, go back the other way, it was the degradation of the building so much to repair, and that triggered the ADA component at that point. It wasn't like we were looking for full ADA to begin with. All of a sudden you see the facade falling apart, leaking coming in, obviously holes in the basement, now you're into 100,000 repair, oh, bing, trigger.
Don't forget the snakes.
God, you guys, oh. You guys never snakes with you.
Someone
in
just give them a
publicity.
net.
Well, we got a kitchen. Got sinks.
But keep in
None of
mind,
the
keep in
ADA
mind, it's
triggers,
not just
no.
ADA, it's
Everything else you're doing outside of the building is not triggered.
Well, now the way I read
That's
that,
what I read.
that's an interesting thing there, because they said that there is,
There's
The
an exemption for
exemption?
exterior maintenance work, which requires roof repairs, replacement, window repairs, replacement, if the cost is less than $500,000.
right.
What page are you on?
When you
Four.
read down,
Or top.
when you read down a little further. Yeah, he says that, and then it goes into the 30% rule, and it says there is no exempt work in E. So that confused me.
Yeah, because like, okay, once you hit, so you couldn't exempt it and then boom, you did.
Yeah, it sounds like it's exempt in D, but it's not exempt in E.
I do go back to the committee, if you're looking for a redo of the report, we have time. We have money, if we had to go to advisor and say, hey, the guy says he's willing to bring the report up to 2021 for 5,000, we'd ask for a quick transfer and get it done.
Just
If
saying
you
that.
want current data, I think that's important, maybe they take, okay, we take up 139 because that work already got done. Boom, like Lisa, you're concerned, what comes out of here that's not still relevant in 2021? So we're dealing with today's data.
But wouldn't it make sense to give them to give them the scope of what we want them to look for? Versus saying, hey, this is our building, tell us what we need.
Well, I'm very specifically, electrical, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, foundation, drainage.
Yeah.
And that's simple enough to come up with.
The thing
Yeah, I
about,
mean,
the
we
thing about
know-
triggering though, the thing about that 30% is building code compliance, not just ADA compliance. The entire building has to be brought up to.
That
code.
whole A, B, C, D, E is in regards to section 2,
No, I know,
which is the ADA.
I know that, but that's just a subset of the whole building code.
Right.
The building code requires, among other things, and this was the kicker on the old high school. The building has to be brought up to the seismic code. That meant that the old high school, in order to be brought up to code, we would have had to open up every corner in the building and put in structural steel bracing. It's crazy. Now, what would happen here? I don't know. Is this structural steel in here? I don't know if this is or not.
1932, I doubt it.
Well, there's structural steel in here. There's a
You can tell.
deteriorated I-beam over here. But my point is that 30% trigger, we're not just talking about widening doorways and, lowering water fountains. That's triggering the sprinkler. We had to put a sprinkler in Green Meadows because of the code upgrade. A single-story brick building with, I don't know how many entrances. We had to put in a sprinkler in that entire building. We also had to bring the well up to date. Now, that shouldn't be an issue here, but, assuming that.
We've solved that one.
Well, assuming that water line comes down, it'll be okay. But,
Well, you're still gonna be the tank.
yeah, exactly. I mean, bringing it up to building code is an enormously burdensome.
Well, that's why we need to know how far we can go without avoiding this. At the rate we've been spending money up to now, we should be able to spread it out over years, get the valuation up a little bit. And, we're only talking a 3-year span here, so it's a phased project. I was gonna ask your opinion, John. Does the current configuration meet the town's needs for a town hall? And do you think it's okay going forward for a while?
In my personal opinion, having been here for a while, you as well, in different offices, we are crammed for space. We cannot perform functions. You look at the building part. The best thing that happened was having people come up here, spreading out papers during the COVID thing and using this as a meeting room. That was one advantage of, okay, I need to meet with the building inspector. come up here and do it, because there's no room in his office. I think there's tremendous, your thought of, well, we got rid of the library, that would open up some rooms up above potentially. It could be,
It would definitely open up a lot of space.
but again, their accessibility is the cattle car going, coming up the front.
Well, no, we're gonna put in the elevator, John, just spend the money.
Whatever, we can like retake it.
No.
The other guy in town.
Part
Just,
of-
just today, there was a request to move this old cabinet here that houses the weights and measures from the 19 units or equipment from the 1920s over to Academy Hall, which I think we're going to do, so that the Conservation Commission could move some stuff upstairs to make room.
They have a very small.
But also, there's a lot of storage in this building of paper,
Yep,
and I think we need to address
Well, that
that.
was one thing we talked about before, that could be, there must be a couple of rooms or closets not utilized at the school that could we go ahead and use it for storage at least.
but why wouldn't you want to look at a place like Iron Mountain and scan it and then you just have to keep it off site for a certain amount of time?
So if you can't,
Electronic storage is not legal in Massachusetts for municipal records.
Okay.
It's microfiche or paper.
I didn't know that, so.
Yeah. And, the,
Can we store paper off-site?
yes, sure.
And then put it over. to
But
Jeff.
There's a lot of records that don't fall under that.
You're absolutely right, and a lot of the department records probably don't have to do that. I mean, the actual public record storage we have here is a 8x12 room. It's not that much space. It's all the other junk. Plus the vault, I'm sorry, so it's 2 rooms. But, there's things like planning board records that they pull out for reference, but they're not legal records.
You're talking the old police storage downstairs.
No, it's the room next to the kitchen.
You
That
know,
one.
That one, that's where you set me up.
Who's in the police storage? Either stuff?
It's empty. The one on the stairs,
No, the one between the conservation and cemetery.
that's Eva's junk.
Nice.
You're talking about the evidence room?
Former.
The evidence room could be utilized, as part of a plan.
Not that it should be. That's,
No, but if you took the wall down, it would give Concom a lot more.
Oh, yeah, you could expand that. That'd be, yeah, you're right.
then we opened the firing range down there.
That was a great room.
but can we hire someone to purge the unnecessary papers? Why store it if, we don't need them anymore?
Wow.
It's not that much space, I'm telling you.
Okay,
And
so,
you're talking about the central storage, public record storage is not much space. And we did go through it 7 or 8 years ago. We spent money and set up a system and all. And I'm a little behind, and that's my baby, and I'm behind on maintaining it, but it's not that kind of space.
It's like the cabinets of the plans, the zoning plans. the
Right.
Maps,
It's in the Board of Health records back to forever and,
Which by God you want, when you go to sell them, like, I need my septic plan, we have it.
yeah,
You
and
know where
honestly,
your well is.
honestly, yeah, we have a lot of file cabinets taking up a lot of space in individual offices, but it's a department issue,
Because now if we were to have a fire here, what happens to those documents?
We had a fire,
Yeah,
they would burn.
so they're not stored in something that would be at least buy them some time or,
Well, the
Like, you
oldest
know,
ones are
fires.
in the vault. No, if they get burned and we get an inquiry, we say, sorry, we lost it in a fire.
I'm not,
Can't-
not what I'm not
can't
saying it should,
Don't
You
tell
can't
me,
throw it away, but you can't.
don't tell me I got
Can't
duplicate
throw
off
away,
site.
you can burn it.
no.
It gets burned. It gets burned.
We're talking about, I have to be able to produce 1932 payroll records.
Can some of those documents go into the police station that's now gonna not be fully functioning? I mean, if you're looking for storage space,
You guys are talking about very small pieces of space. This is not significant. The central record storage is 2 rooms that are smaller than this meeting area here. The smaller the area inside this table. There are 15 file cabinets in the planning board so they can get access to their records. But we're not going to change that with an offsite or another grand study.
They have parties.
That's a department by department problem. And maybe each one of those could cut down 20%, but
Mhm.
we're not gonna change the square footage of the building over that.
No, I understand. I mean, when he was talking about the possibility of using storage at the school, at TWB. But if you're gonna talk about that, I mean, in the same right,
I
and the police
understand,
station is guarded, there's someone there who could access any document you would need.
but my opinion is you're talking about very small space.
Okay.
Be happy to give tours.
That'll be the next meeting.
Next meeting, I can give you an update on the grant system for from the State Office of Disabilities. When the applications are available for planning grants, when the decision will be made, and roughly how long we have in order to get all that done. And then we're eligible to apply for very significant grant money to undertake ADA type improvements.
Is there a requirement that you have to prove that you've had meetings for a certain period of time to say that you actually have a committee?
You have to show that you have an ADA committee compliant with the law. The law requires that the majority of the board, for example, have disabilities. That's what held us up
Yep.
originally, finding people who would comply with that requirement.
Is having names that on a committee sufficient though, to Laura's point, like, shouldn't they have meeting minutes or something? Like.
Because you could potentially be asked to validate how often, who's meeting,
I
if
think
they've been
we're
meeting.
getting into micromanaging.
I mean, I'm not necessarily looking at that. I just want to make sure that that's not going to create an
Well,
issue.
as I said, I did
That's all.
exchange email with Becky just within the last week about getting going again with that
Okay.
committee.
I hate to go back to this. You were talking about conservation wanting to use space up here. Are all those cabinets outside their door full?
Yeah.
I thought a lot of those were empties.
I thought we threw away all the empty ones.
I haven't looked.
All right.
Those I think are planning. I'm trying to remember, because Bonnie was saying something about planning had their filing in their conservation
All the
space,
appeals down there, I think.
something like that.
It seems to me that an issue that we're maybe tiptoeing around is there a commitment of the town to maintain and keep this building or to knock it down? I mean, I hear little rumblings here and there. Is there that commitment of the town?
I think it's all about money.
What's that?
It's all about money. What's
It's
the
all
number?
on the cost.
I can't hear what you're saying.
It's all on the cost.
What's the number? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this sheet here that pulled up was 800,000. Now, if there's electric issues, if there's plumbing issues and stuff, that number could be $2 million.
Look what happened at the fire station. They thought they had a simple solution. All of a sudden they checked the electrical and boom, they pull the thread on the sweater and there's more to do.
If you.
Well, there's the cost, but there's also the alternative, you know, say if the cost is 2 million, but the alternative is 4, then 2 doesn't look so bad.
We don't have the data. I mean, if you ask, walk around the building and ask people whether we should keep this building or not, it'd be split right down the middle.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I have a fond spot for this place. A lot of people absolutely hate it. You know, so, but so you gotta go, you gotta have the data. What's the alternative?
Well, we
I
can't
mean,
keep dancing around. I'm embarrassed that people come in looking at the wall there with things on it. The paint outside is, you hate walking up to the front because it looks horrible.
It looks
Gotta
old.
get-
It looks like Amby.
We need, you know, so we need, you know, if we're gonna save this place, we need some kind of phased approach. And, you know, obviously those exterior repairs should be high on the list, and the ADA, and the accessibility should be high on the list.
You push that wall over there, those tiles bend when you push them.
Yes.
Get ready to come down.
It's scary over
Yeah.
So is that fixable for a reasonable price?
There's probably water damage coming down inside the wall from the window.
You're not answering the question.
No,
John.
but
You're
it's one
just-
of those things, you got,
Right.
the guy goes deep into it, oh geez, didn't realize those studs are all bad.
So who's the one that would deem a building that, you know, you couldn't use it? Wouldn't that be
Who would
Hobie?
condemn it?
Yeah.
Building inspector.
So has he walked through the building to look at any of this stuff?
He knows all about the building and all of its defects. He
That's
is
a
threatening
danger.
to
You
issue.
don't
Put it in
want-
writing,
you
put it in
just get a
writing.
Contractor to do an inspection.
Right, you put, if he puts in
You either
writing,
get these people here to come in here, ask them if they have the ability to inspect the entire facility. Okay, and update the report.
You know, I think we have a good handle on what is not ADA compliant from this report. Nice to know. But a strategy for comparing the building without triggering full compliance would be nice. And again, the status of what we need for real repairs.
all right, do you want them to go forward and say, look, let's find a way to bring this report up to date?
I would
The
like,
question they just need to be asked is, can they evaluate the condition of electrical, mechanical, plumbing, et cetera? They may be more of an architect that says, this is what it needs to look at. Or do we call a local contractor to do?
I think you go back to what you said before, which is, you don't want the building inspector to do it because that triggers, but he can certainly recommend.
Oh, like when I bought the house, I had somebody come in and do a house inspection. Somebody like that, but on an industrial type scale, and there's people out there doing it.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, all we can do is ask the selectmen to do this. Yeah, okay.
Well, we can make a
recommendation to
suggestion,
this
right, for a
committee.
recommendation?
Can we bring this report up to date?
Yes,
We would make a recommendation, I think,
And
right?
I would say quickly to advisory, if we had a quote in the 5,000-6,000, do you think it'd be an unexpected expense we could get
Could,
something covered?
Probably.
Or at least a
My only,
transfer.
well, my only hesitation is, is it unanticipated, unexpected, unanticipated costs. It really isn't. I mean, it's
Okay.
not-
How about
If I
the
had
end of
extra
year
money in
transfer?
townhouse maintenance, it would qualify for the report.
Right, I don't have any problem with line item transfers and things. I'm just thinking back, with some of the tree requests, we had some issues on that.
All right,
what about
maybe under
CPA
some
funds for
townhouse.
the study?
Dick, would you think?
End of year transfers, Doug?
Yeah.
End of year transfers?
Yeah, that's probably the way to do it.
Verify that.
But couldn't they use, couldn't they do what they did over at the?
Yeah, we gotta wrap it up anyway.
we do need to wrap up. Bob has to leave at 7 sharp, and we probably need to just wrap up anyway.
I think we're done because it stopped recording.
Well, I know.
No, it's recording on here.
Okay, I'll be happy to bring forth to the selectmen that we would like to see this report updated. And we'll work with the building inspector to find someone to update it for us with an eye towards more detailed stuff, not just architecturally, but systems, different systems.
Should it make sense to get Becky at least involved and make sure she sees this?
It sounds like, it sounds like
From the
Bob's gonna follow
ADA?
up with the radio.
Yeah.
Okay. Just so from the ADA committee perspective, they're not surprised by any discussions that happen. I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Do we have any, my only question would be, what do you want to talk about next time we meet? And when do we want to meet?
I think we'll have hopefully the car data from different departments, that'll be something.
Yeah, I'm out of town.
Oh, where are we at?
Wisconsin, drink beer and cheese.
All right.
Get a bra-
Get a brat while you're there.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I'm happy to meet with Wisconsin.
I like